Q Crime, and this is the fine print. The Competition Commission of India says that Google is abusing its dominant position in several markets in India. Via two separate orders last week, the regulator imposed a penalty of over 2,000 crores on Google. But more importantly, it directed Google to fix its unfair business practices by giving several cease and desist directions. And before we come to what next and what are the implications and impact of the regulator's order, here's CCI conclusions in brief for those of you who've not found the time to read the CCI orders during the festive period. Now, the order on Google's Play Store policy says app developers are being forced to use Google Play Bill System or GPBS, both when users download a paid app and for in-app purchases. The CCI says Google also bars apps from giving the consumers an option to pay elsewhere, such as on their website. So you're forced to pay using Google Play Bill System on your phone devices. And if app developers refuse to agree to Google's terms, they can't list on Play Store, which means losing access to 90% of Android phone users in India. CCI says Google Play, through its Play Store, is differentiating between Google Pay and other apps facilitating payment through UPI, such as Bheem, Paytm, PhonePe, etc., by only allowing its own payment offering, that is Google Pay, on its platform. Also, CCI has noted that paying via Google Pay has been made easier for users compared to other UPI options. Google, it says, gets access to significant and granular data of app users, complete personal as well as financial transaction information. This information, CCI has noted, is not shared in full with the app developers, giving Google a massive competitive advantage to better its own properties. The regulator's second order, which examined Google's conduct in general web search and Android operating system market, notes that Google's agreements with Android smartphone manufacturers ensures that Chrome is the default browser and search app, mandatory pre-installation of entire Google mobile suite, and their prominent placement amounts to imposition of unfair condition. It says that Google has leveraged its dominant position in Android operating system market to enter as well as protect its position in online video hosting platforms through YouTube. And finally, through these various agreements with smartphone manufacturers, Google has reduced the ability and incentive of device manufacturers to develop and sell devices operating on alternative versions of Android. Now, to understand the impact of these very technical CCI's orders, for smartphone manufacturers, app developers, and users, I have with me Vikas Kathuria, Associate Professor at Munjal Law School, and Nishant, Chadha, Head of Research at India Development Foundation. Gentlemen, welcome to the fine print. And I must add that it was a Herculean task to get independent voices to talk about these Google cases. So I'm glad Vikas and Nishant are here to give us a non-conflicted view on the consequences of CCI's finding. Vikas, I'll come to you first. Look at it from the lawyer lens and help us understand what the CCI has done, because it's delineated, and I'm sure and Google has said that it appealed both the orders. These goes in appeal, the legal grounds will be pressed upon by Google, whether it is to say that, hey, look, we are achieving business efficiencies, our products are better, at the end of it, users are benefiting from it, we are cross-subsidizing a lot of small players through our revenue models. All of these will be argued in court.
Yeah, Payaswini. So if you look at the orders, both the Android and the Google Pay, so the trigger event in both the orders was that Google was a dominant entity. So if you have to challenge the order, you can say that, look, the trigger event was absent and the Google was not dominant at all, right? For that, you have to say that Apple was a competitor, etc., in the Google Android especially. And the second is like, on what count can you do is like the theory of harm. The theory of harm is like, and this is something that, tells that consumer welfare or any other standard has been compromised. You come up that, you say that self-preferencing was not there, leveraging was not there. So on that count, you can do it. And finally, you can bring in business efficiency, efficiency reasons that certain practices were required because it enhanced efficiency, or they were required in general because security was a reason. Why sideloading is not, for instance, is allowed, because it's important to make sure that security of the system and privacy of the users is not compromised. Why folks are not allowed, because perhaps in the long run they're gonna adversely affect innovation. So on these principles, Google can challenge the orders.
Sure. Nishant, I'll just come to you in a bit, because I have a follow-up question. That you said that, the variety of sort of grounds that Google will take and, in appeal, given what happened in Europe, given what happened, let's say, in South Korea, was there a foregone conclusion for, let's say, the India market in the way our regulator will come to the conclusion?
Well, if you look at it, Payaswini, it's very interesting that these practices all over the world, they have been to a certain extent similar, and Google, since it's dominant in India as well, so the basic approach would be the same of competition regulator, right? If you look at the EU, if so India, so far as the Google Android is concerned, they had a starting point. It had, the EU had already taken a stance, and CCI had to see, like, to what extent Google was following the similar practices in India, and it had to fit the entire theory of harm in the competition law framework in India. And to that end, it has done a good task.
Okay, Nishant, coming here and where the economic sort of assessment hat for us in this conversation, the CCI has sort of looked at the players that are sort of, let's say, Google's rivals, competitors, and those of whom are sort of in agreements with Google. Do you think there is enough solid economic assessment done by CCI to sort of give the theory of harm argument that Vikas just alluded to enough legal legs to say that, yes, this conduct is abusive?
So first, I think that the first point I wanted to make is, which will be relevant for both these discussions, both these cases, is that what we're talking about are all platform business models, which essentially means that they are at least two sides to the market. And unlike traditional theories of harm, in platform business models, you need to understand that changing one thing on one side of the market can actually have repercussions for other sides of the market as well, right? So I'm going to take a very simple example. If I look at the Android case that the CCI judgment, so the establishment of dominance is, I think, very well done. They've delineated what the contracts were and how those contracts were leading to the dominance of Google search, which is what the EU has, by the way, also said, right? They have, and so like Vikas, I want to appreciate the Commission for, which is that they have not only looked at one particular strategy that the company has followed, but they've tried to look at a set of them, which together lead to an outcome that the CCI thinks is harmful. So to that extent, yes, I think the CCI has done a good job. What I would have liked to see more, and I think that is probably we're asking about grounds for appeal. The theory of harm has not been spelled out, according to me, has not been spelled out very well. What I mean by that is that, yes, supposing Google did enter into contracts that made its search widgets prominently placed and it was directing traffic towards it, which of these are harming consumers? So I think that would be important to establish, right? What is the harm that is given to the consumers? Because remember, again, Android is a platform, but it doesn't charge any side of the market. And that's a concerted Google strategy, right? So you are providing this licensing service, it's not charging anyone. And you are then, of course, on top of that, building and exploiting that dominant position. How much of that exploitation is on merit, and how much of it is actually abuse of dominance is, I think, the question. I would have to say that I am not entirely convinced that the theory of harm has been well established, although some of the conduct is very difficult to defend. But that's my answer to the question.
But Nishant, when you are saying that the theory of theory of harm has not been sort of deliberated upon adequately, in your opinion, you are saying from the context of users, maybe you and I. But in this context, aren't the rivals or the other players, the app developers, from whose point of view this should be looked at, or rather the theory of harm should be looked at, and they have, I mean, several of them have responded to CCI on Google's practices.
No, sure. See, the point is that, and that's what I started with. So supposing you change, so this is an entire sort of ecosystem that Google has developed. So it only charges. So if I go back to the App Store case, it's clearer to explain. It only charges about 2-3%. I'm not exactly sure how many sellers are charged that commission, the commission which the CCI thinks is excessive. And on Google provides other 97% of the sellers also some value-added services. Now, whether those are increasing or enhancing efficiency is a question that we need to ask, but it is providing those services. That's its claim. And those services, for example, Vikas mentioned security and privacy, and whether those are, again, useful to consumers or not, we don't know. So, and on the other side, you have these consumers, right? So the effect is that if you change the contract that Google has with those 3% of the sellers, what will the impact be on the other 97? And what will be the impact on the other side of the market, which is the consumers? Google doesn't charge an access fee. So supposing it tomorrow moves from a transaction fee model to an access fee model. So my point is that platforms, when they change, it is very difficult for them to change business models piecemeal, because that's not how platforms are monetized. So that's what I mean when I say that while the market is being delineated as a two-sided market, and I again want to commend the Commission for doing that, the analysis, however, still seems to be driven by one side of the market. And I'm not sure that that's the right sort of approach in its entirety.
Okay, when it goes to appeal, because how would you have seen, or rather, if I were to take from what Nishant is saying, that the other side of the platform market, there the CCI's sort of maybe conclusions are not as well articulated. What kind of, let's say, legal lens should the regulator have put to make sure that this theory of harm hurdle or threshold gets evidenced enough or to a large degree in its order?
So, personally, I am afraid I do not agree with Nishant on this particular analysis, because if you look at the nature of competition law, it's just not short run. It's also in the mid run and the long run. Let me give you this example. I give you, a COVID-19 vaccine. Just assume that it is priced below cost price. I'm a dominant player, so I have deep pockets, and I can give it to you. Like in the, say for example, it cost me $100, but I charge you $40 for this. Everybody is happy. Consumers are very happy because everybody is making surplus. But what is the consequence? You are killing the competition. And once the competition is gone, you're going to recoup this investment. You're going to recoup your losses. So what would be the loss? The loss would be in the long run. There could have been more competitive players who would have charged more, but you have killed them. And when the predation is going on, nobody enters the market. Likewise, if you look at this multi-sided market, yeah, certain sites are definitely zero price. The user is paying nothing. I'm not paying anything. But if you look at my cell phone, it's an Android phone. I don't have to tell you the brand name, but everything was already here. And it's a very efficient Google suite. Google is amazing. So far, it's the golden standard. But should it be the only standard? No. And behavioral economics tells us that hardly anybody, most of the people, like marginal consumers stick to the suite that you have given them. They do not delete them to go for alternatives, especially because Google is a very efficient, service provider. So what happens? Because, you do not provide opportunity, nobody will be entering into the market. And we'll be left with just one Google. And this is not what it should be. Remember, if we were left with just one Microsoft, one Yahoo, there would not have been any Google. This is what we are trying to create for the future. And this is what the case of CCI, or for that matter, European Commission, has been against Google or any other big tech giant who do not charge any single penny to the consumers. So if you look at the appeal side, they're gonna stick to this theory of harm.
So, I mean, in your mind, to your mind, then CCI has fulfilled the legal requirements to a large degree to make its case by saying that, hey, look, you're a dominant entity, and in XYZ cases, you're abusing this dominance. But I'm saying the third leg of, let's saying that this abuse of dominance is resulting in this, let's say, anti-competitive consequences by, let's say, not people not getting access to the market, people getting, let's say, discriminated against vis-a-vis Google's own properties. Has this third sort of requirement, legal requirement, been sort of sufficiently dealt with by the regulator?
Yeah, in my opinion, definitely. Because you know, look at it, abuse of dominance, what does it result in? Anti-competitive foreclosure. You are foreclosing competitors from entering into the market, or for that matter, staying in the market. And this has been, spelled out very well, and the circuit is complete. So in my view, CCI has done its job very well.
Okay, Nishant, let me come to you. So, look, it's all well and good, and it will play out in courts. But I mean, while the legal sort of conversation is important and pertinent for the parties involved, it's the commercial implications that at the end of the day, the app developers, the smartphone manufacturers and users like you and I are concerned with. Given the evidence that we have, let's say from a South Korea or a European Commission, have we seen evidence? Because I think European Commission's order came out in 2018, I think on search and the Android OS. Have we seen, let's say, the market improve and become more competitive? Or Google has just figured out ways to maybe start licensing in some markets, or while I was reading in, I think some of the other markets, it started auctioning the search widget. Are we going to see the same sort of consequences play out here in India as well?
So again, before I answer that question, I think we have to be careful with what markets we are comparing ourselves to. And what I mean by that is, see, the Commission and regulators obviously learn from each other. These big tech business models, of course, spread across the world. And Europe has been the sort of the flag bearer for big tech regulation, and that is influencing not just us, but obviously also on the other side of the Atlantic, there have been calls for regulation. But so far, the US has managed to push back against these things. So clearly, there is a lot to sort of, I think, learn from the experience that the European Commission has sort of charted. And I completely agree with Vikas. As I said before in passing, there's a lot of conduct in these judgments that it's, obviously something that Google also felt was perhaps not kosher. For example, which is this mandating payments through its own system, right? Which is Google is anyway trying to change. So Europe, and a big distinction is that Europe is what I would call a covered market. Europe has about more than 90% penetration along any digital parameter you think of, right? So 90% of them are on social media, or whatever, how many of them are active, I'm not sure, but that's the kind of market we're talking about. It's absolutely not the case for India, right? Our business models, therefore, will be driven by trying to get perhaps newer people on board and bringing them onto the digital markets. And that's happening. That is being done through various actions, including by big tech and small tech and all kinds of government action. So that, I think, is the first distinction, that we have to be careful that not all evidence that we get from Europe will translate into something similar that might happen here. Having said that, I don't know of any credible evidence that has emerged in the last 2-3 years as to what has the effect of, I mean by that, I mean empirical evidence that has emerged, what the impact has been on the market. But I would suspect, we haven't seen much, because otherwise we wouldn't have got the DMA. So we've got the Digital Markets Act, which contains certain provisions that are very similar to what the CCI, for example, and Remedies has suggested. What we do know is that from earlier cases, some of the remedies that the CCI has suggested, for example, in the App Store case, haven't had or too much of an effect or a mixed effect. For example, the MMT case is very similar to the Booking.com case. We have a price parity. There was a price parity clause that they had. We had the commission's found fault with it. In one of the remedies suggested for Google, the App Store case is what they're calling anti-steering. But anti-steering, because of the way the platform works, is actually like price parity, because it is like saying that you cannot force the sales to finish on the Google platform, which is what price parity does, right? You're trying to ensure that the sales that are initiated on the platform finish there, because that's how transaction fees you make money.
And you don't steer them to, let's say, another payment
that's right. So
tab,
now,
let's say, or a website or any other, the site
yes,
of
you
the...
won't do that, right? And in side loading is already possible in this case. In some cases, Android has some conditions as to what you can side load. But for most applications, side loading is possible. But the Commission, I think, rightly suggests that side-loaded applications in the consumer's mind are not substitutes from Google because of trust or privacy or security or whatever it is. Now, if that is the case, then I think requiring Google to prominently suggest that sales can, or allowing apps to suggest that sales can be finished outside the platform is like, not having a price parity clause. It seems to be mixed, right? So it doesn't seem to have changed a lot, either in terms of market share or in terms of whatever the European Commission wanted to do. And I think, I think while these appear very, price parity appears wrong intuitively, unfortunately, that's not how platform models work. So what has happened is that I think there might be far-reaching changes. It depends on how much these remedies harm Google's existing business models. I don't know. I don't think any of us knows. Maybe the Commission does. So obviously, if the change in Google's revenue or profits is too high, it might, as I said, force a shift to a different kind of business model, which of course will not only have implications for the larger app developers, games, and others. It will also have implications for value-added services that Google provides free to others, including, for example, having some sort of access fee for certain set of consumers, which would be different. Will it be bad or good? I don't know. That we have to evaluate once we get the changes there, or is prominent enough. So that's so I think it might. Whether it will or not is, I think, have to wait and see.
Okay, since you've alluded to remedies, let's take our viewers also through some of the cease and desist directions that have come from the CCI. It has told Google that you have to give smartphone manufacturers a choice in pre-installation of Google's proprietary applications. It has been asked to decouple licensing of Play Store from the requirement of pre-installing Google search services, Chrome browser, YouTube, Google Maps, Gmail, or any of its other applications. And finally, no monetary or other incentives can be given to original equipment manufacturers for ensuring exclusivity of Google's search services. In the Android market, or rather in the Play Store market, what the regulator has said is that app developers must be allowed to use third-party billing and payment processing services. No discrimination against apps that choose other UPI options, and no restriction on end users to access and use within apps the features and services offered by app developers. Google has also been asked that the data that it collects from various app developers' platform to have a clear policy around it, disclose it adequately and abundantly, and also share the data with the app developers. Vikas, coming here, in terms of these directions, have we gone far ahead from what, let's say, other markets have directed Google to do? I don't think European Commission has yet started its investigation in the Play Store policies case, but we have some sort of, let's say, directions to look or compare in, let's say, the search market or the Android market. Has the CCI gone above and beyond in its directions to Google?
Look, personally, if you look at the remedies could be both structural and behavioral. The idea behind remedies is to put an effective end to the abuse. So remedies cannot be completely different from the nature of abuse. The theory of harm that you have identified, that you have proven, has to be addressed through the remedies. And the kind of remedies in the form of cease and desist order that the CCI has issued, I think it, to a huge extent, addresses this problem. So let me just take a step back. You had asked this question to Nishant, but I think in order to answer my question, I have to perhaps deal with it. You see, nobody knows the future. Google is an amazingly innovative company. You have to give it to them. So perhaps even after the application of all these cease and desist orders, even if they comply with it, completely, Google may still be number one. But however, what CCI is doing is just giving an
I mean, being
opportunity.
dominant is not unlawful. You can
Not
be
at
dominant.
all.
It's the
Not
abuse,
at all.
right? Yes. So you can continue
the
to be number one, but it's the abuse that the CCI is trying to curb.
Exactly.
Please go on. Sorry, I cut you short.
No, so this is the idea. So long as the competition on the merits is concerned, Google will continue with it, and it's fine. Competition is good, and this is what a competition regulator ensures. What is bad has been addressed. It has already been prohibited. It has been said that Google can't continue with this practice. And let's see. At least we have opened up the market, and nobody knows the future. We do
No, of
not
course.
pick
Look,
winners.
to both of you, it's not my case to say that, look, CCI should not give the rest of the economy, whatever relevant markets we are talking about, a level playing field. I think that's the job of the regulator. What I'm trying to get to is do a realistic assessment of how much can a regulator do in a market where, I mean, Google over the years has sort of mastered the art or mastered the game in a variety of these markets. And to also call out that in two of the sort of areas, CCI has not made a conclusive sort of finding. One is where the informants were complaining about how Google is monetizing its properties, to say that what both of you also referred to, that 97%, let's say, of apps and being on Google is free. It's the 3%, or rather it's through the 3% that it's cross-subsidizing the remaining 97%. And there also, in that 3%, there are thresholds that if you cross a certain threshold, you pay 30%, otherwise you pay 15% and some such. And the second market where Google, the CCI has not reached a conclusion is this 30% commission that a lot of players had complained, whether that is anti-competitive in some sense. Nishant, tell me this, that even after, let's say, the CCI has said what it has said, are you seeing that the existing models and how Indian players and domestic players have evolved and come to sort of design their models around Google's practices, whether to be on search, whether to be on Android, whether to be on Play Store, will have to markedly change their business models and the way they function? So while you've opened the innovation road, what does it mean for existing players who are, let's say, set in their ways? To be, again, sure, some of them were complainants in the case. How do you see that relationship change or evolve?
So, see, as far as I know, both actually in all jurisdictions, the US, Europe, in India, in the Play Store, the complainants are obviously applications who have grown and do not like the 30% commission, right? Now, my view on the 30% commission, you mentioned that the commission has not, the CCI hasn't said too much about it. See, as a competition economist, I think that the antitrust regulator should not get into pricing. If they feel that the pricing is getting towards a monopolistic setting, what they need to do, as Vikas was saying, is to correct it. You have to figure out why the monopoly has been established. If it's on merits, you don't do anything. However, if you believe that it is being done because entry barriers are being created, for example, through the signing of exclusive arrangements, as the CCI has said in terms of the App Store and other cases. So if you feel that these are exclusive arrangements which are driving up the monopoly position, then of course you do away with those conditions, as the CCI again has done, and then wait for the market to resettle into what I would call a new equilibrium. See how the company reacts, because this job is not done, right? this is going to continue and Google will come up with new practices. How that will impact the commission, that doesn't mean that the commission may not have to say anything against a particular company 4 years, 5 years, 7 years down the line. So that's number one, right? So the prices, if you believe, if your assessment is correct, then correcting those should anyway correct the prices. I think that's the first thing. So the commission should come down. In a lot of cases in Google, I think it's already being readjusted. So that's number one. You asked a question about how would domestic players see it. So I'm going to go and on a leg and assume that a lot of our domestic players are actually not developing an alternative to the Play Store. So they're not competing directly with Google. They are going to develop applications that actually sit on an app store. If you were an app developer, what would you do? You would go for the DOM because that gives you reach that is unparalleled. And I think even with the changes that are being suggested, that reach would still be there.
Yeah.
One, because I think network effects, well, they are there. We can't get away with them. First movers have advantages in certain markets. AT&T had it in the telecom market. Our telecom providers have had it. It's there. Sometimes the first mover advantage is there. Microsoft has had it. So I think that's something that we may have to understand and agree to, that look, this is what it is, and we can take antitrust action, have ex-ante regulations. But that's one. The other thing is also that, we've sort of talked about this throughout the discussion, but see, one of the things that CCI obviously has a problem with, a lot of regulators do, is bundling. When you bundle services, of course, that gives you bigger reach to negotiate and bargain. But unfortunately, I think that a lot of these services are complementary. And I know that because not only does Google bundle its own thing in a sort of this, whatever it's called, a service
GSM,
suite,
yeah.
but so does Samsung. You see, so it's because these are complementary services. And I think that it is useful for both consumers and app developers and the platform to bundle some services together. The entry point for a lot of people these days is that, I've seen that for some other work that I do is, they talk to the phone, essentially. That's voice recognition that becomes the entry point for a lot of people. So these services will remain complementary. So they use that search service to reach things on the internet. They buy some services. These are very seamless. And again, I think that unless we get an alternative in the sense that somebody figures out how to challenge Google, not based on the fact, challenges don't have to be digital entirely. You see, for example, Indic languages. So you have to fix this collection of data, this transitioning to the internet. It starts because of a real need. And if you can differentiate along those real needs, I think we might get an Indian app store also. I don't know, So the whole point is that, because it's right, things change, they are dynamic. The job of the CCI and the commission is to ensure that unfair entry barriers are not created, foreclosure is, the markets are not foreclosed. However, if you ask what's going to happen in the near future, I think, we might see the dominance continue. Even if Google sticks with the remedies. But that's, again, we're looking into the future. We don't really know what is going to happen. But, and if it does, that's, well, fine, because then clearly, as far as our society and economy thinks, Google is establishing that dominance in a fair way. So, so be it.
Okay, from what I'm getting, at least from the both of you, is that commercially a lot may not change. The case, of course, will continue to be fought on legal grounds in courts, but for the app developer world, the smartphone manufacturing world, and the users, because also to switch between platform, like how many of us end up using 3 different UPI gateways? We end up sticking to one. Similarly, I don't have, let's say, several map apps on my phone. I just stick to, let's say, Google Maps. So to break those habits, no matter what the season directions are, consumers might just end up, because of those habits, downloading the same apps that Google was selling as a suite to begin with. But that's not to say that it's not the regulator's job to open the market for innovation and make way for domestic players to have, let's say, a level playing field to grow and innovate. Vikas, Nishant, many thanks for joining us here on the Fineprint and taking us through some of the practical implications of the CCI order. Of course, We'll stay tuned and cover this and stay on top of this case as it goes through appeal. So continue to stay tuned to the fine print, and thank you for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.